So as I said, what I'll do today is really tell a little bit of the story. It'll be a synopsis, really, of the story. There's a lot of detail that we went through when we were really building UBS SmartWealth, but hopefully you'll get a flavor and have the chance to ask questions as well. So really, we were looking in the innovation lab at UBS in Zurich about what was going on in the US and what was happening in robo-advisors in particular in the US. And we started to see what was happening. And if you think of the US, they're probably 3, 4, 5 years ahead of us in terms of robo-advisor space. So currently now, we're in a changing landscape. So if you look at the topics around fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence, robotics, all the things that are starting to happen, the rise of the fintech firms, so we just heard from Revolut, which is really great, and all the other ones that are coming. So this is the environment that we're really in. And we're seeing a lot of disruptive innovation in the finance sector. We've seen that in the last 2 presentations. So we're really seeing a sea change of what's happening out there. So with robo-advisors versus traditional, so traditional, you would have a relationship manager, a client advisor, or someone who you would actually talk with. Robo-advisors are more self-directed, so you have to build systems which enable the same experience or close to the same experience that you would have had with a person, but actually with a robo. So it's fully automated in terms of what we've built. There's not really any human interaction on either the onboarding, but there is a lot of human activity in the back in terms of the investment and in terms of the client management team you can talk to. But in terms of getting into the platform and getting access to UBS and sort of diversifying the amount of people that we can attract and give the experience to, this is what we do for Robo. And normally, robos are a portfolio of ETFs, and we've talked about before. So they're pretty simple to construct. The hard part is working on what those ETFs are and looking towards the future and how they actually protect and grow your wealth. So we're also seeing a lot of younger people now, and a lot of the fintechs are started by people in their 20s or early 30s. So really, they're targeting millennials. Born into an era of mobile, so that's very much mobile native or very digital native. Also talked about high earning, not rich yet, or Henry for short. So these are people who are accumulating wealth and growing wealth, and maybe they've started fintechs and they will get wealth in the future. Shifting customer preferences, so we're starting to see now the consumerization. So we're seeing with the work that Amazon does and other companies, there's a shifting view of the world, and this also has to be taken account. And these robo-advisors are serving the need of different consumer expectations. And there's really a rush to see lots of these new entrants are in, especially in the UK, in fact. So if you look at what's happening in the UK, Germany, and around the world, there's lots of these robo-advisors. But robo-advisor is actually quite a broad term, but there's lots of companies that are trying to get into this space. And you're also seeing some of the large incumbents, and UBS being one of them. We started probably a couple of years ago, but you're seeing the likes of HSBC and others, and a lot of the retail banks actually now bringing their wealth propositions to affluent or mass affluent. So what did we do when we started UBS SmartWealth? So we really needed to start to think differently. What we didn't want to do was take a legacy system and try and put a nice front end on that and then present that to the world as something that's different. What we really needed to do was start from the customer, the person, the human who actually interacts with the service. So we needed to start to think differently. This is actually the place where we did most of the early experience design work. This is actually an agency that we used to get an outside-in view. So it's a very different world than a corporate world or a desk world. This is actually the rum storage that the ships used to come in to give the rum to London, and they used to be stored in here. Now it's an area for actually design and fashion. So how do we think differently? So there's an option whether we buy or build. So there's a lot of talk, and I'm sure there's a lot of talk in other companies about, do we just buy a proposition And I know a lot of the fintech companies get proposed all the time for companies that want to take that knowledge and the customer base. But there are pluses and minuses to build or buy. So the pluses for build means that you don't have any legacy. So there's nothing there actually that's holding you back. You can, much in the same way as a startup, you can build from scratch. You can use the latest technologies. So in SmartWealth, we've started to do that, and I'll explain a little bit about that as well. You can use the latest architectures. So you can start to use things like microservices and other ways of developing because you're free actually to develop whatever you want to. And you can integrate with other services within the company. So actually, for very big companies, and a lot of the big companies like UBS, there's a lot of great talent and experience in the company. And also, there's a lot of really good thinking. So what you can do is take the advantage of building something from scratch, and also then building it into the things that you've already got, which offer a lot of value. But the same challenge about building it happens with the startups. It's probably a little bit harder within big companies because of the way that they're set up. But you have to start from scratch, so that means everything. So we built the client management team, that's the service team. We built the software. We built the team basically from scratch. So there were 2 of us at the beginning, and then it grew to, at its peak, about 80 or so. So you have to actually build everything. So effectively, you're trying to build that startup internally, but it's within an organization that's not really used to that model of setup. So the other side is buy. So with a buy, it's a known entity, so everything's already built. You've already have clients and everything's ready to go. On the negative side, what about the culture fit? So when you see a startup that's built up, how do you integrate the culture? How do you integrate the technology into maybe a traditional company versus a startup company? That will be very different. The other process that went through is whether it's outside or inside. So even once we've decided we're going to build it, where do we build it? Do we set up a separate legal entity? Do we go outside and start to build this from scratch and try and do it ourselves outside? Or do we choose to be inside, be within UBS and those groups that you talk to within UBS? And these are the questions that we asked. So outside, you won't have the processes that are built for a large organization, so you get the agility and the speed, and basically you can run it close to a fintech because it's a separate legal entity. You can foster innovation and things are made quicker, and it's also a lower initial cost because actually you use services and other things that potentially might be a little bit more cost efficient. But the problems are you have to go through the whole process from scratch. It's a little bit like what we were talking about before. So you have to have the licenses. You have to go to the regulator. You have to do all the things that a startup would have to do. There's the operational, the risk control, all of the things that you would take for granted in a big company. You actually have to create those from scratch. And a lot of the fintechs and the startups have growing pains because when they get to a certain size, they have to have all of these processes, HR, control functions like legal and compliance, etc. You also don't get the brand. So if we launched UBS SmartWealth as something else, we won't get the advantage of the UBS brand and the sort of the heritage of that comes with that. And potentially, if that external company grows and you want to integrate it back into the bigger company, what you might get is a lot of integration cost problems. And there's lots of examples where companies that are purchased and try and integrate, or companies that are grown outside and try and integrate, have a lot of problems for the things I mentioned before. So what we chose in UBS SmartWealth is actually to go embedded. But that came with its advantages and disadvantages as well. So the advantages were we already had a license in place, so we used UBS Wealth Management in the UK's license with the FCA. We can leverage the brand, so UBS is actually a well-known brand and it's a trusted brand. We can also leverage the expertise that we've got internally. So there's a lot of clever people in large organizations as well. There's a lot of entrepreneurs in organizations that act in a way that really tries to take the company forward. So it's not just the fintechs that have these people that think differently. They're also within bigger companies. So on the negative side, we also, to move as fast as a startup with inside a big company has its own challenges. So the big company obviously has a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of mechanisms in place to run that very big company. But sometimes they're competing with the fact that you want to move very quickly. So we had to work through the compliance and the legal, the challenges that we get to try and do things differently, because to a certain degree, we look very different when we're on the inside, and that gets challenged. So there's a lot of noise and disruption and fear as well. So when you're acting differently within the organization, sometimes it can be thought of white blood cells of the organism don't necessarily like the thing that's different within that organism. So there's challenges that you face by the organization itself, even though you're trying to push the organization forward and do things in a different way. So change is pretty tough, and it's pretty tough in a big organization. There's a lot of things within UBS SmartWealth that would have been a lot easier if I would have done them on the outside, but I get the advantages that we've mentioned on the inside. So we didn't just build a nice web app. What we had to do was pitch to the executive committee of wealth management a whole business. So we basically architected all of the parts of a business that you needed to do and built that from the inside. So that's everything from customer service, everything from data analytics, data science, the offering, the pricing, working within the constraints of the company. So there's really 3 layers that we built on. UBS at the moment is going through a very big technological transformation in wealth management, something called One Wealth Management Platform, and that's consolidating a lot of the legacy systems into one big system. And we spent hundreds of millions making sure that that works. So we've got a really good base for the future. There's also the enhancements for the client advisor-led offering. So this is bringing technology in for a client advisor-led offering. So that's making sure that client advisors have the right tools at their disposal, and they can have the relationship and do the things they need to do and the things that customers want. Really, for UBS SmartWealth, it's a digital-led offering. So that means pure digital is the way that we want to go for SmartWealth. So that has its own challenges as well. So take the onboarding, for example. What we wanted to do was, rather than the time it takes currently to do it, which can be in the days and maybe even longer, we had an ambition to get the onboarding time. So that's the time it takes for you to try and sign up through the KYC checks, through the AML checks, all of those checks, and we wanted it in 3 minutes. We sort of missed a little bit, and it's about 6.5 at the moment. So we had an ambition to be super quick on the onboarding, but we had to do that digitally. We had to do it in a way that scales across geographies, because UBS is not just in the UK. UBS is in lots and lots of countries around the world. And to build the platform, what we needed to do was to make sure that that platform was multi-entity, multi-language capable, and it could scale as a platform. So a little bit about the tech. I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail. So my history, I've spent probably 20 years on the technology side. I love technology. It's just that now I run a business. I've always been on the periphery of technology and business before. So for me, I'm quite happy to flick between business or tech. I'm quite happy with the questions. So what did we do to start with? So based on the fact that we had pretty much a clean sheet, then we went with a microservice architecture. So what that really means is, rather than build a really big monolithic platform, we've got little services that all talk to each other, which actually means if we move to another country, we can swap out those services to do something else in another country. Or if there's a better version, we can swap out the little part of the service to provide a better architecture. And this is normal. If you're starting a fintech, you'll probably do this. In a big organization, you have to choose what you want to do, and this is the way we went. So I've talked about it before. We had to be multi-entity capable, so we had to have tenanting from the start. Now, that's a little bit of an overhead when you're doing it for one country, but it means that actually, if we want to go to other countries, we can move very quickly, and we can make some of those changes. If we move to different countries, the main things that will change are the onboarding, because that's dictated by the regulators. The onboarding will change. And also probably the products will change, so there'll be local market equivalents of the products that we've got. But we've got an asset management division, which actually made the passive product for us with the smart beta overlay, and that asset management can build other products for us as well. So the other thing that we did when we were building the architecture is really make sure it's very flexible. So we want to be able to go to any country in the world with UBS SmartWealth. We talked before about the One Wealth Management Platform, and where that platform is, we'll integrate with that. But we didn't want to be fixed on the places that the one WMP would go to. We wanted to make sure that we had ultimate flexibility. So we've basically built an abstraction layer between UBS SmartWealth and core banking, or the back-end systems, which means we can use any. So we can use our own, we can use the local country-specific versions, or potentially we can use someone else's platform if we wanted to. So just a little bit on what we did in terms of the onboarding. So to get the onboarding to around 6 minutes, you have to start to do things that are a little bit different. So the current process is that there's a manual check for something called negative news. So what we do is we make sure that we check the internet and different sources to see whether you've done anything wrong, and we wouldn't want you as a customer. Those are done manually at the moment and go through Google, Bing searches, and other things. To get it down to 6 minutes, we had to automate that. So we had to use natural language processing, AI, to enable us to search hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sources to see if the match for the person that is onboarding has done anything wrong in any country, not just the UK. So that's how we can do that onboarding so quickly. So how do we operate? So we had to find a sweet spot. What we need to do is combine the heritage of UBS and the intelligence that we've got internally. So get access to the people that can navigate and go through, access to particular capabilities that we have. So we did this through things like the wealth planning module we've got. So we have goal-based investing. And a lot of that work had already been done internally, and it's used for the current business. We just made sure that we could integrate it. So we involved subject matter experts. So that building that we went to, which was the room loft, actually we brought people in from the organization and brought them to that place. And we basically took over that place and had everything on the walls. So we really worked with the experts within the company. We leveraged the licenses and the brand that we talked about before. But what we also wanted to do was act and work like a fintech. So we had a greenfield approach, so we pretty much started from scratch, and we had the ability to do that. We got senior sponsorship to allow us the freedom to do it, which is an important aspect of what we've done. We got a lot of autonomy in what we did, which increased the speed at which we can start to make decisions, so we can actually move forward very quickly within the realms and the constraints that we had. Agile product development, this is normal, but this is something that we work to. Actually, within the teams, they have a choice of which agile methodologies they want to use, whether it's Scrum, Kanban, whatever it takes to build the best product and in the fastest way. We decided early on as well to make sure everyone was co-located. So everyone is actually in the same office. So that means all the engineering teams, marketing, data science, the business teams, the client management team that answer the calls are all together. So that works the same in startups, but it's actually really important for us because the developers are right next to the conversations that happen with clients. They're right next to the guys that do the front end. They're next to the UX and the user experience. So everyone has a very short communication channels to make sure that we can improve the product. And we also have sort of lean investments. So we've got, in corporate environments, you get yearly cycles of the investments, but we've made sure that we can move very quickly and we can get access to the funding when we need it. We also very heavily sort of rely on analytics and data. So from the very start, we instrumented everything in UBS SmartWealth. So every part of the experience, we're collecting data. And the reason for that is that we actually don't know the questions that we want answered in the future. We just need to collect data now, and which means later on we'll have the data available to answer the questions we need to answer. So the result of that really is take the traditional and the expertise that we've got in a company of 60,000 employees with an approach like a startup and try to do as much as we can within the company and really blend those two. So the things that we really need for success, an outside-in view really helped at the beginning. So having an experienced design agency was actually telling us, why'd you do this? And we'd say, well, we've always done it. But why? But why? But why? So they constantly challenged. And in a lot of cases, we say, actually, we don't know why we do that anymore. It's been lost in time, why we do it. And they said, OK, there's a better way to do it. Some other reasons were regulatory. So we said, OK, the regulator demands that we do that. And then they say, OK, let's leave that alone then. But the important thing about the outside-in view is that you constantly get challenged to make sure the ideas that you've got are very robust. The danger is within a big organization, you get groupthink, so everyone just agrees with each other because it's part of the culture. And what we wanted to do was break that and get an outside influence to challenge us and constantly make sure that we were robust with our arguments. What we also need to do is use the tools that actually are used very widely in startup communities: business model canvas, value proposition canvas. How do we build the business? How do we really make sure that the value proposition is right for the customer? How do we meet customer needs? This is not about we know best. What we really need to do is find out what the customer needs and the pain points are and start to really develop to meet those needs. And that's the advantage really of starting from scratch, because you can build the system, the platform to meet customer needs. You can also do other techniques as well. We did a lot of design thinking where we actually showed customers prototypes and get research, gather all that information and then start to develop. Craftsmanship and change makers are really important. For us, we kept a really high bar of the people that we wanted to be inside UBS SmartWealth. So we really got the experts. We got people that were in the core team to reach out and find people that were better than them. So that was the challenge. Go and find someone better than you to come back in the team. And we kept the bar really high. We don't want warm bodies. We want real experts and craftsmen, craftswomen that develop the product and really take pride in it. Also, find the entrepreneurs within the organization. So for a big organization, and the bigger it gets worse, and a lot of the startups will find that as they get bigger, so it gets harder to do things, but you need to find the change makers, the people that are the entrepreneurs within the company, the people that want to challenge and push the boundaries. So that's not break the rules, but it's to challenge and to constantly push forward to see, how do we make this better? How do we push the company forward and develop something that everyone's proud of? And that often comes with risk and personal risk. So if you're challenging constantly the company and what it does, you get into situations which you can potentially come close to being pushed out the door because you're really trying to push against the organization, and you need to ruffle feathers, but do it for the right reasons. You also need to involve control functions. So if you try and build something and then have a ta-da moment at the end and say, hey legal, hey compliance, take a look at this and see what we've done, it's not going to work. You need to involve them from the beginning and find the people that know the art of the possible within those areas. They do exist. A lot of the times, people would say that control functions find it easier to say no because there's no risk. If they say no, nothing comes back on them. If they say yes when something is a little bit riskier to do, which you have to do when you're trying to change things, it comes with a certain set of risk. The other thing is senior sponsorship. So you really need to find people in the organization at high levels that give you the air cover and the protection. So it doesn't matter how great you build it internally, the amount of change that you're trying to push needs the air cover, because you will start to make the organization feel you and feel what you're doing as you push forward. So the team is diverse, and what I mean by that, and truly, is it's truly diverse. So that's not just race and gender, which are the simple versions. It's to get people who think differently, to get people from different cultures and experiences. So they got me. I'm from the north of England, so I'm sort of adding that cultural experience to the SmartWealth team. Co-located, multidisciplinary, so get people that know a lot of things. Don't get experts in a single thing, get people that can do multiple jobs, and also not work to job title. So in big companies, people work to job title and say, hey, that's not me, I don't do that. In everything that we do in UBS SmartWealth, people just find what work there is to be done and just get on and do it. And that means me building TVs or whatever I need to do, or fixing the Macs. Whatever we need to do or to take us forward, that's what happens. We get experts and the craftsmen, craftswomen, and you push for change. There's a disadvantage of getting really clever people. They need to be stimulated and they need to be engaged, or they walk. So for us, the people within the team are constantly get asked by startups and other companies, hey, just come to us. And startups are actually well funded and more funded than actually a lot of the bigger companies in terms of the project. So we need to make sure that you keep the people engaged and stimulated. So that means actually working on innovative things. It's working on challenging projects and making sure that people enjoy what they do. There's a constant pull from other organizations, so we have to make sure that the environment is enriched and there's good things to do. And also, we need to try and get around the constraints of a large organization. So there are them. We can't get away from the fact that in big organizations, things are different than it would be in a small organization with pretty lightweight bureaucracy. So make sure that the right processes are implemented or changed, or at least you get exceptions for them. Make sure that they've got the equipment that they want and the tools and the development areas. So we need to think about art of the possible. So if you think an organization that has 60,000 employees, probably another 30,000 contract staff, so there's 90,000 people within the organization. And for the organization that's around sort of 80 people, UBS SmartWealth has actually had a ripple effect through the organization. It started to change the thinking in the bigger organization as well. A lot of people now would say, well, if they can do it, so can we. And the organization is actually trying to change, because this is applied innovation. This is not innovation that's in a lab somewhere. This is actually applied. So we're actually working through things. And a lot of the innovation labs actually get us to try things as well in a production environment. So it makes it real. Yeah. So if you think of the scale of the organization and the scale of the team, if you do start to challenge and you do start to push, you can actually have a bigger effect than the size that you are. So if the organization is the big circle, then we're the little one. And that means you can have an aura effect. That means you can start to change the organization. I'm not going to go through all of the things on here, but you start to change the things within the organization. Account creation from days to minutes, for example. How do we know we're on the right track? Analytics. So it's the same way as a pilot would fly a plane and cover the windows and fly an instruments, we have to do the same. So we track business performance on KPIs for the business, which are the high-level business ones, marketing segmentation, marketing models, propensity, all of those things. So there's lots of ways that you can start to build predictive models, You can build models about who might leave the company, campaign analysis. Because we're digital, we can track a campaign all the way through to a client in the end. Customer service analytics and other things. So information is very important to us to make data-driven decisions. We have to do that because we don't have people on the front to tell us how it happens. So expansion. So we're in the UK now, but there's discussions about where we go next. The platform's ready for it, and then we'll now decide where we go in the future. So that's SmartWealth.
Thanks, Shane.
Right.